Do you remember the movie that you were obsessed with as a child? I do. Mine was The Wizard of Oz. And my mother, she would drag me around town singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow at the grocery store, her hairdressers, the bank. Believe it or not, when I visit my hometown today, people still ask me to sing that song. How my parents didn't know I was gay is a mystery to us all. But that's a story for another day. If you remember if you remember The Wizard of Oz, you probably remember the Wicked Witch of the West. And we knew that she was evil, but we didn't really know why she was evil. And if you know The Wizard of Oz, you probably know a new version of that story that's been very popular. Thank you. And if you know that version of the story, you know that it does something very different. It takes a traditional antagonist, the villain, and it humanizes her. We see why she does what she does. We see the system and the people around her and how they've created this mess. We see that she's just trying to find a way out. You know, the way that we've told stories over the past 2 or 3 decades has changed a lot. I started to notice it when I was in college. We've taken the traditional antagonist, the bad guy, and we've humanized them. We've had our villains turn into these kind of humanized half heroes. There's good and there's bad about that. But the stories that we tell, they help us teach children the difference between right and wrong, heroes and villains. You know, I love Rihanna, but you really shouldn't be friends with the monster under your bed. It's just bad advice. 2010, Despicable Me. 2014, Maleficent. And then 2018, I believe, was Venom. Then you had Maleficent 2, you had Cruella, and then you go up to 2024, 2025, you had Wicked, Parts 1 and Part 2. Each of these movies has made over $500 million. And they've been some of the most popular movies in the past decade and a half. You can even look at something like Marvel. And today they have Agatha All Along, a show that very much takes a traditional antagonist, the villain, and humanizes her. And these are just a couple of examples. I mean, most stories today, they really focus on broken people inside broken systems, and that's how they build their tension. And if you take just a second, think about the movie that you were obsessed with as a child. It doesn't have to be complicated, just the first thing that comes to mind. Okay, now think about your favorite movie that you've seen in the past year, or your child's or your grandchild's favorite movie. Do you know the villain in that story? You probably do know the villain from the story when you were a child. It's pretty shocking to me when I've looked at the data. When I'm looking at the 80s and 70s versus movies today, the shift is really obvious, especially when you look at children's stories. But why does this matter? Well, movies, they don't just entertain us, they train us. And when that training leaves the theater, it can become very real. In 2016, dozens of young athletes came forward with accusations against the Team USA gymnastics doctor, Larry Nassar. And what shocked the nation most, it wasn't just that the abuse had taken place, it was that it had gone on for so long. For more than 2 decades, athletes had been uncomfortable. Parents had noticed red flags. Coaches had realized something wasn't right. But institutions, they didn't stop it. They kind of explained it away. He was described as kind, gentle, a healer. And by the end, more than 500 young women had been abused. Not because people were cruel, but because they refused to believe that someone who looked so innocent could also be deeply, deeply dangerous. I worry about societies that refuse to believe that evil exists. But I must admit, in the beginning, when I first started to notice this shift, I only saw the positive, because there's so much positive about the way we've changed how we tell stories. The fact that we now crave complex characters, and instead of flattening characters, we're humanizing them, that's a massive cultural win. And it's no coincidence that so much of this change has happened at the same time that people of color, queer creators, and other marginalized communities have finally been able to have a platform to tell their stories. Stories of suffering, of injustice, of becoming something they never wanted to be. But as we change and eliminate evil from our stories, it doesn't just change how we see villains, it changes how we see responsibility. Because if every harm that's done can be explained away by someone's pain, no one has to take accountability for the harm that they cause. And that is a very dangerous lesson. Because empathy without accountability, it can protect the wrong people. Now, I want to look at another example, Harry Potter. Harry Potter hasn't been one of the most successful stories of my lifetime because it's complicated. I think part of why it's so powerful is that it's fairly simple. You see, there's this one main villain, Lord Voldemort, and we never have to pretend that he's anything that he's not. He's evil. No one stops mid-battle and asks him about his trauma or what happened to him in his childhood. We do learn a bit of that, and I think that the evil that's represented in Lord Voldemort is so undeniable, as is the goodness that's in Harry. And I think that dichotomy is really, really powerful. And our stories have gone through phases. First, it was fear the monster. Stories taught children that if you looked different, you were probably dangerous. Then it was understand the monster. We realized that some monsters were just people that were misunderstood. But I think that we need a third step. We need to see that the monster can be real, but we can also humanize the monster, but don't pretend that they can't still hurt you. Another example that I like is Friday the 13th. May not have expected that one. But Jason is a really interesting character to look at because there's no doubt that he's evil. But we do see a bit of his childhood. I mean, Camp Crystal Lake wasn't a walk in the park for him. But again, no one stops mid-movie as he's wielding a machete to ask him why he's doing this or how we got here. He's evil. And I do think maybe we need more stories today like Friday the 13th. Stories where it's obvious who's right and who's wrong, and we can point out the evil really easily. And I think one of the reasons why this is a bit uncomfortable is because evil rarely looks like the scary monster, like Jason. Evil often looks like our neighbor, our colleague, sometimes even us on our worst day. And that brings us back to the stories we tell. The Wizard of Oz. And I know that I'm going to get this from someone. I realize that the Wicked Witch, Dorothy may have dropped a house on her sister, so There is that backstory, but she was wicked far before Dorothy ever flew into town. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. But the Wicked Witch of the West, she's taught generations of children something that's so important. Not that if you have green skin that you're evil, but when evil is presented, someone has to be brave enough to step up and stop it. Dorothy didn't stop the Wicked Witch with hatred. She stopped her by saying, "This is evil, this is causing harm, and it must end." And she put herself between that harm and the people that she loved. We all have a responsibility for recognizing evil when we see it and for doing something about it. If you're a writer, that responsibility matters. If you're a parent, that responsibility matters. If you're a leader of people, that responsibility matters. You know, the thing that I keep coming back to, though, our stories are pretty unlimited. We can accomplish all of this with the stories that we tell. We can teach children that there's a difference between right and wrong, but we can also teach children to grow up to be empathic adults. And I think if you are teaching children or raising children, it might be smart to think about the diversity of stories that they're consuming. And that's why I worry a bit that the pendulum has swung so far from one way to the other. Because when our stories only teach empathy, we may grow kinder, but when they also teach bravery, we grow more capable of protecting each other. Thank you.